Welcome to The Victory Show.
Hey, Victors. Welcome to this episode of The Victory Show. If this is the first time you're joining us, I'm Travis Cody, best-selling author of 19 books and the creator of Bestseller by Design. I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of business consultants, founders, and entrepreneurs write and publish their own best-selling books. And through that journey, I've discovered a fascinating pattern. A lot of businesses really struggle to break past that seven-figure per year in revenue mark. So on this show, we sit down with some of the world's most successful founders, CEOs, leaders, and business owners to uncover the strategies they use to scale way past that mark so you can do the same. So get ready for some deep insights and actionable takeaways that you can implement in your life and business starting now. Today's guest has worn just about every hat you can imagine in healthcare, from founder to operator, investor to advisor. Becca Gordon is a serial entrepreneur and a C-suite executive with over 25 years of experience driving innovation across the healthcare ecosystem. She's built and scaled startups in women's health, medical education, and health tech with deep expertise in commercialization and go-to-market strategy. One of the companies she founded, Two Doulas Birth, was acquired in 2017, and since then, she's advised hundreds of early-stage digital health and med tech startups and served as a VC advisor and investor. Currently, Becca is the commercial lead at Shadowbox, a groundbreaking company tackling one of healthcare's biggest pain points, interoperability. Whether she's building strategic partnerships, optimizing revenue, or shaping category-defining messaging, Becca's focus is always on bringing transformative ideas to life. Today, she lives in Northeast LA with her husband and two sons, and when she's not driving the future of health innovation, she's out in the wild, an avid traveler, Sierra Club educator, and lover of chocolate chip cookies and cheese pizza. Becca, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun.
Yeah. All right. So I love it. How are you so good at bringing transformative ideas to life? What is the secret to your is there system of being able to do that? Because I know a lot of people have ideas and most people just keep them as ideas. So how do you bring those forth into reality? And we'll talk about your journey as well, but I just want to get in the good stuff before we start.
Yeah, sure. So I think some of it is dumb luck, right? I'll be honest with you, right? And just the belief and the willingness to try. There's this feeling where if you have an idea that you are on the precipice, you're on a cliff, and you're hoping that when you jump off, there's water at the bottom. And there's a lot of people who will stand on that cliff, and myself included. I'll stand on that cliff for a really long time, and I'll try to peek over the edge, and it's not visible down there. You can't know for sure. And so there's folks who never jump, and I'm a jumper. I've learned to be a jumper, not by nature. I am not a very spontaneous or innovative person by nature. I'm sort of careful and cautious, but I've built up the skill of that willingness to jump and setting myself up for success. So, I often have a parachute on my back when I take that leap, right? Of like, well, if this doesn't work out, then just pull the plug.
Uh, I'm pulling old Tom Cruise. Even if the parachute catches on fire, you still got another one in reserve there.
There you go.
So, what was your path into just the healthcare industry in general? Was that an intentional sort of
It was
choice, or did it kind of choose you?
It chose me. It was totally lucky. I graduated from college when I was 20, and my intention at that time was to go back to,
20.
yeah, I know, overachiever slash didn't have a budget to keep going, so I had to go fast. I My intention was to go back to grad school, and I just wanted to take some time off. I'd been in school nonstop at a pretty high rate, and accelerated learning for a lot of years, and so it's like I need to take off for a few years, save some money, and just kind of go on the path of taking care of myself for a few years. And where I happened to land was in a medical education company. And so I had actually started there while I was still in school. I started all the way as a receptionist,
Wow.
after school job. And I lucked into this great startup environment in healthcare, and it really got bitten by the bug.
That you were off to the races from that point, huh?
Totally. I worked my way up at that company. I really lucked into a sales job. I found out I was really good at sales when the only salesperson at the company went on maternity leave, and I was the only other person in the room. And they said, you can answer sales calls. And it turns out that I love that, and I love people, and that comes across, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so many lucky steps to get me to where I am today. Built my career there, ended up starting their B2B line of business as the B2C product when I joined, and kind of built half the company. And yeah, really fun.
Wow. Well, natural sales is definitely a gift, that is for sure. A lot of people struggle with that. So to not even know what it is and just jump in and discover you're good at it, I'm sure that is come in useful when you've been making pitches.
Absolutely. I just like talking to people and understanding what their problems are. At the end of the day, I'm very much a caregiver. And so for me, like to understand where people are coming from, what the gaps are, where their problems lie, what the pain points are, and then being able to do something to resolve some of that is a real fill for me.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the journey with two doulas. Where
Sure.
where did that come? Where did that idea come from? Because I gotta say, a company that you start up in the doula space that then you exit. I don't think many people have ever heard that before because most doulas are just focused on helping and the business thing is kind of on the side. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the journey with that.
Yeah, it's like no matter what space I'm in, the entrepreneur hat doesn't come off, right? So I was working as a doula. I had moved from Tennessee, where I had trained and been living, to Los Angeles, which is a very different landscape in terms of the
Slightly.
birth, right? Which is great. I really got to learn in different environments with different groups of people and communities. And when I came out here, I noticed that there was a real gap in terms of childbirth education for expecting parents. There were
Mm,
classes at local hospitals, and those classes were primarily around kind of what to expect when you come to the hospital and how to be a good patient. And then there were really lengthy and very, to my mind, outdated classes like Bradley and Lama's classes and things that originated in like the 60s and 70s that were still teaching about things that are not the reality on the ground today in Los Angeles in terms of practices when folks show up to have their baby at a hospital or birth center. And so I didn't have classes to recommend to my doula clients. And I started Two Doulas, literally did not start a company. I started a class with my colleague, Leah Miller. We just wanted to teach a class that would be evidence-based and give good information based upon our experience on the ground as doulas. And it was really for our doula clients to start with, right? So we had 12 couples in a little room in Los Feliz off of Hillhurst that we rented from someone. And that's where it started in July of 2012. And really off the cuff, people loved the class and there was a huge demand for it. And so the next 5 years of my life was all about how to get that to be accessible for more people, how to teach out of more locations, how to bring that online, how to develop a curriculum. Yeah, how to grow it and build that community and make that information and really practical knowledge more accessible.
well, I love what the litmus of this is that hospitals are offering education, but the education is really like, here's how you can be a better patient to make our lives easier. Not like, here's everything you need to know for the monumental life shift that's about to slap you in the face.
Totally. And I mean, it's a combination of so many different things, right? Like the journey into becoming a parent. There's identity shifts, there's like cultural shifts, there's how you relate to your own family, there's how you relate to your partner, like relationship shifts, and then there's like the physical aspect of going through, the delivery and then the aftermath, right? I feel like when people show up to a childbirth education class, they think that they're coming in to learn, hey, how do I get through this crazy thing called labor that may be scary or maybe exciting or some of both. But what we tried to infuse our class with, and I developed over the course of time, was a curriculum that took all of those other things into account and threaded it through the class. So it wasn't just about walking in and learning how to be a good patient, to that point, or even just to get through the one day that is labor, maybe 2-3 days if you're unlucky, but how to kind of go through the whole journey and advocate for yourself and figure out how
Mm,
to communicate better with your family, your partner, how to set yourself up for success, how to give yourself some grace, all of those pieces
wow.
that thread into the after.
So what did that first year look like then? Did it start just with your own personal clients and then sort of word of mouth made it so you were like, oh wow, we've got to start taking more classes?
Super grassroots. We each put in $500 and set up a one-page website that had a schedule and some basic information about our ideas. We set up Facebook pages, very like early social media before Instagram was a thing, and got things going that way. But I think the biggest way that we grew our business in the early days was to partner with other people who were also touching the lives of folks that were expecting a child. So we worked with acupuncturists, chiropractors, midwives, physicians, pediatricians, lactation consultants, stores that sell goods to people who are expecting. And so really tried to go out into the universe of everyone who could better the lives of people who are expecting babies in Los Angeles and to partner with them. And so there was this reciprocal referral relationship, almost like a channel partner program that we set up with those individuals where we would refer to them and they would refer to us. And we had a great set of resources to really have wraparound care for these families that were expecting.
Wow. So how long into that then did you start realizing like, oh, we actually need to open up more locations? Is that like the first year, year two, year three?
The first year was focused on kind of refining the curriculum, developing out the course. We were full from course number one, in terms of the first location, right? So then it was like, okay, we're doing this on Tuesday nights in this one location. We need to start building this out. And we started having individuals that wanted classes in their location come to us. So it was not just us going out and soliciting more locations. It was really a need. Like, I think the key to our success and the key to success for so many businesses, right, is that product market fit is actually solving a gap. And we got that right on the front end. And then we lucked into other things. Like we named ourselves Two Doulas Birth because we couldn't think of a better name. And for SEO purposes and everything else, having doula and birth in the name was genius, but it wasn't our genius. It was So yeah, that first year was really about figuring out that we actually had a business, setting up an LLC, like, just the basics of, oh, this is going to be something, not just us teaching classes on a Tuesday night. And then I think it was around the year mark that we started doing two different things to grow. One was to train and bring on other educators. So it was, not just our blood, sweat, tears, labor of actually teaching the classes that were, that was, driving revenue. And then the second was the expansion in terms of new locations and continuing to refine the curriculum, take feedback, and then build out the sense of community and the wraparound services. Again, kind of what are we going to refer out to? What is in that channel partner lane? And what else can we do? So we started doing refresher classes for couples who were, coming back and having second, third, fourth babies. We started bridging out and doing like postpartum information days where we would gather experts in the community to prepare people for that next step into postpartum. We had community events that were just free community events that would sort of build that framework, and then started online communities as well. At one point we had our Facebook group had 10,000 individuals in the area.
Wow.
So really that second year, I would say, was building out the business in the Los Angeles area. And then in 2014, I actually bought the business from my partner. So I was in a partnership up until then. And in the summer of 2014, I bought the business from her. She went on
Was
to
was it because the company was growing so fast and she's like, oh, this is getting too big for me, or she's just like, oh, I want to be more hands-on and
life circumstances. She had her second baby. I had my first baby. So like our life circumstances were shifting. And I think that she was looking to figure out kind of what her next path was. And she ended up becoming a labor and delivery nurse, which is amazing, and has gone on to do incredible things as well. But yeah, just shifting changes in life, right? And so bought the business from her. And then once I sort of had the keys, kind of got out of that initial postpartum phase with my first baby, then it was like, okay, how do we continue to scale beyond just what we can offer to folks in our immediate area, right? So at first, in that kind of third year, it was like West LA, right? That's a whole nother world. That's a whole nother country, so to speak.
that's a 3-hour drive away.
Totally. And so like, how can we, a different community, a totally different, I mean, you lived on the east side, you lived on the west side, right? And so it's a really different feeling. And it's also the practices in the local hospitals and birth centers and midwifery groups are different. And so like, how do we make that jump, and how do we broaden, and how do we continue that feeling of, we have this experience on the ground where you live, and be able to widen the aperture enough that we can bring in folks that live other places. And then what was, I think, way before its time, was taking that curriculum and developing online resources and tools and having online classes.
Hmm.
which now is an expectation post-COVID. But, back then in 2016, when that was launched, was something really brand new. I think we were one of two companies in the nation at the time that was delivering an online childbirth education class.
Wow.
Um,
So for you personally, like what were some of how did you have to, for 2014 to 2016, like what were the skills that you suddenly had to kind of up level? And then how did you go about, you know, figuring that out? Because you're going from kind of just one-on-one hands-on being instructor, but now you're growing a business really quickly. So, there's a bit of a skill gap there in the beginning. So how did you recognize what you needed help with, and how did you go about sort of, I guess, evolving your own leadership skills?
Yeah, I was lucky in that I had the past history of having been at this medical education company and in my 20s, and being in a leadership role and starting out as a individual contributor and then building into a team leader. So I did have some skills that I had developed from that. I also had the blessing of having some really amazing doulas and educators in the community to bring in that were very like-minded, and it was very plug and play to bring them into this particular kind of class design. But I think the biggest piece for me personally was twofold. One is the enemy of good is better. And I'm such a perfectionist. And so a lot of times I would push further than I should to improve things,
Hmm.
and miss out on timing, right? And so it's that funny balance between like do things in a reasonable amount of time and do them as well as you can, right? And
Sure.
the other half of that is not trying to do everything and stepping away from being a micromanager, and really allowing others to do things differently than you would, and also allowing things to not be as good as you think they should be or you could maybe do on your own, because
No.
business, if you are trying to do everything for yourself, right, like that's a recipe for burnout, and it's not sustainable, it's not scalable. And so um expecting others to always be able to do things the same way or at the same level as you would do them is not reasonable. And so having that mentality of, I'm going to pass on this knowledge and expertise that I have. I'm going to mentor those people. I'm going to level them up as much as I can. And I'm going to give them the keys to the castle to succeed. And a lot of times they come up with ideas that are even better than what I would have come up with. The person that I brought on when I was buying the business out from my partner to kind of help me from an operational standpoint, because I was also a new parent to my first child at that time, was a really different thinker than I was, and just thought about operations in a different way than I did. And she came up with ideas for the business that I never would have come up with, right? And if I had been micromanaging that experience, the truth is I didn't have the capacity to at that time because I had a new baby and was running a business. So I kind of had to let her have the keys a little bit. But the benefit of that, of seeing like all of these new ideas that I personally just wouldn't have thought of, right?
Mm,
Seeing it take
yeah.
a life of its own. I always think that raising a business is like raising a kid, and at some point you send it off to school and you get like this whole group of other people, your employees, your 1099s, your channel partners, all these influence people who have influence over your business. You're basically handing your kid off to them like kindergarten, and they're helping you raise that business.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. So I've had a few people that are for part of this book that they run their own venture capital funds and they invest, right? And so it's very interesting. And then obviously that's what you do now too. And so just talking to them from the investor standpoint, when you're looking to buy, right? Like Mike, one of the questions I asked was like, what prevents companies from scaling the way they could? And every single guy so far is without hesitation, they're like the founder refusing to let things go. And I was like, oh,
Really
that was,
hard. It's like your
yeah.
kid, and like
Yeah.
you've been doing it on your own, and you have to like be like, okay, you can do it differently. Then it's really tough. Really tough.
It's really interesting. It's sort of that sense of perfection, right? Especially with business because it's your brand and you want to do it. Like as an author, my first book took me way longer than it should have because it kept obsessing over it, right? And my second book, I actually got a publisher, and so I had a publishing deal, and so then I was even more like, this is my shot. I got it. All right. And so even though they had a team of editors, like I spent like a ridiculous amount of money having my own editors go through this thing. And so I think I had three editors that went through it. They had three editors that went through it. I had like 15 beta readers that went through it, and I'm like, this is, and then we published the book, and in the first 5 pages after it was published, I got 3 typos.
Yeah.
I was like, how did 20 people look at this thing? It got this typos. And it was funny. I still remember like having that experience. And it was like, I felt that little perfection part of me go, you know what? Like, I just, with books, and I'm sure obviously it was business, but I got to the point with my own books where I'm like, is it good enough? Like, just to go.
If 20
Right.
people read this and they didn't notice the typos, clearly they're really getting
Yeah.
something out of the content of the material such that the typos aren't standing out to them. And that
Yeah.
will be with the rest of your readers as well.
And and my fourth book, what made me really, and what really kind of solidified this is I got this is while ago when Goodreads was still very hard to get on Goodreads, and I got a pretty good Goodread review, and it was 3 stars. And so it was my first Goodread review, so I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And so I'm reading it, and there was a lady, and she's like, "This is what I liked about this was good, this was good, this was good," and she's like, "But I'm only giving it 3 stars because it's not very well written." So as an author, you love that. You're like, "Oh, that's awesome." 2 weeks later, I get a notification that said, "Hey, this review has changed," and it changed to 4 stars. And so I go back there, and it's like, "Okay, update." So it's been 2 weeks since I've read this book, and I found myself coming back to this book again and again, and I've been applying the principles to it, and I'm noticing a positive change in my life. So I'm upgrading it to 4 stars. And then as like the little backhanded compliment in parentheses, she put, "It's still not very well written." And I thought about that and I was like, well, would I rather be the guy with an okay written book that somebody just said it changed their life for the better? Or do I want to have a perfect book that no one ever reads? And after that, I was like, okay, I guess I'll just move forward. So it's interesting how that this human psychology is that way. If I put this out in there and people don't know this, and 99% of the time, 20 people didn't catch the typos. So this thing that we're obsessing over ends up not being the case anyway.
I think there's a piece there too where like your identity is tied into what you're doing for a living, right? If you're a founder, in order to be successful, your identity has to be tied up in your idea.
Mm.
And if you're a writer, your identity is tied up in what you're writing. And
Yeah.
there's this place. And
So if you say the book's not very good written, you're saying I'm not a good writer. It's personal.
I think there's this point as an entrepreneur, there's a point, hopefully, I think as a writer, maybe I don't know about that. But I think there's a point as an entrepreneur where you have to extricate that a little bit. And you have to say, like, this was my idea and I've built it up to this point, and this is what needs to happen in order to take it to the next point where I want it to go. And that wasn't originally part of my idea, right? And so there's this extrication of your identity from that idea that is now taken on a life of its own. That child, so to speak, that business child that has now grown up and taken on a life of its own and has its own ideas about how it wants to be in the world.
Has its own personality now.
Yeah.
So the idea to exit, like, was that something you intentionally sought out to do, or was that again sort of a happenstance if somebody came in and said, "Hey, we like what you're doing," and
it was something that I intended to do. I was trying to do a lot of things at once in that period in like 2016, 2017. I was the COO of a brick and mortar company, an early childhood development company that was trying to solve the gap between at-home care, preschool, and kind of help socialize and support kids' socializations in those early years before they go into a preschool environment. I was a direct services provider as a doula. I was mentoring other doulas, and then I had this company, Two Doulas, and I had other
as if you didn't have enough going on, and you had a kid.
And I had a kid, and the intention of eventually maybe having another one. And so, yeah, I definitely was looking around and going, I need to make a change from a personal point of view. And I had gotten to that point where I had sort of raised this child up to the point where we had, 80 something 1099s, 12 employees,
Wow.
7 locations, online curriculum, all of these things. And my background and experience had been in scaling an early stage company up to a point, taking it to market, going into that market, building it, and then handing it off. And so my comfort level with what it would take to then take what I had built and scale it further from there wasn't there. And I had to be really honest and say, either I have to level up my own skills and become someone who can be the CEO of what's no longer an early stage company, and no, it's no longer a startup. Do I have an interest in doing that, like going down that path? Or I have to be okay with a different plan and handing off this to someone who does have those skills, right?
Yeah.
So there were happy happenstances in terms of the acquisition partner, but when it comes down to the decision to exit, it was very clear to me that a combination of kind of personal life trajectory needing to go in a different direction and not having this, to be honest, not having the will to get the skill set to
Yeah.
be an
Well,
entrepreneur at that
well, I
time.
think though having just the insight to realize this is my skill set and this is where I'm really good at. In my work, working with a lot of entrepreneurial authors, you see them scale a business to a certain point and then they think, well, I can do everything, right? Where you're just like, I'm really good at ideation and getting to market and growing it. And then past that, like,
Yeah.
right. And so then like that cycle of like, let's build, grow, exit, right? You can do that. And I think too many people sort of get caught up in like, no, I got to ride this thing all the way to the top instead of letting it go. It's really it. When I was in Hollywood, we would also see like I was friends with a guy where he was really good with pitches and ideas and concepts. And so like he had an agent, all he did was concepts. So he would go in and pitch like five or six. Hey, here's an idea for a reality show. Here's another show. Here's another show, and he would get $50,000 every time he sold the concept. And we were always like, man, like you're so good at like, why don't you like own it and write it and do it? He's like, I'm not a writer.
Yep.
It's like I couldn't write for the like I'm really good at pitching and I love ideas, and so it would, and all the writers are like, how do we learn that skill, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is he makes seven figures a year because all he's doing, he's just going in all day and he's just pitching ideas, and then he same thing. He's like, here's your idea, take it, and then he just goes off, and then they do whatever they want with it. So, anyway, where I'm going with that is the recognition of what your skills are and being okay with like this is where I'm good at. Whereas I think too many people, especially in today's social media world, who kind of feel like, oh, I have to be amazing at everything.
Yeah, and nobody is. And like we have to get really honest, right? And I think that's easier in some ways when you're a founder than it is when you're working with or for someone else, right? Like when you're working with or for someone else, there's this need to present yourself as, all knowing and all capable for a particular role because you're not defining what that role is. For me as a founder, as an idea person, like I get to define what that role is up to a certain point. And when that role grows too big or no longer fits my skill set, then I have options, right? And I've started more than one company, only one has had an exit. So, it's not like I have this perfect track record of 100% success, and nobody does. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very rare to get to that point with a company. And there have been times where I've walked away. Same position. Hey, this either needs to grow or it needs to close, and maybe closing is the option.
Mm. And that also takes a lot of courage because when you put a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears into something, it's hard to say, oh, no. I think a lot of people would, keep fighting to try, I got to keep the idea alive instead of going like, well, maybe not. So, so after you exited, like, I mean, did you just kind of immediately then pivot into like the brick and mortar and the other stuff that you were doing, or did you like?
No, it was a big transition period in my life in that time. And what I was exploring in the time that I exited was like, what if I just do direct services as a doula? Let's like go back to like just, entrepreneur hat off for a while. Let's just like do this role. And that was really cool for a couple of years. And then I had a second kid and got to, go have a maternity leave, which I didn't really with my first one. And that gave me some space to like reevaluate, hey, what do I want to be doing?
Mm,
And there's this thread that's gone through my life and my career, and it comes from my family upbringing of really wanting to uplift other women. And it's been there in my personal life, it's been there in my community life, it's been there in my professional life. And so the thought process of, what do I do next when I was coming out of maternity leave, coming out of having, exited and had my business acquired was, how can I help women entrepreneurs? How can I help people who are innovating in women's health? Like, how can I do things that are going to support these different areas? And so I started a coaching and consulting practice at that time, coming out of my second maternity leave. And it led right into COVID. And
wow.
I was on leave, and my son was born in May of 2019. I was on leave for a number of months, and I started this consulting practice at the end of 2019. And then, COVID happened. And so that required a significant pivot. And I got the benefit of supporting businesses in a way that I didn't know was going to be needed. So a lot of what I did in 2020 was, hey, brick and mortar company, woman run, local mom run, brick and mortar company needs to make a pivot during COVID. So everything from hair salon that needs to go mobile to brick and mortar store that needs to have an online store, right? And so a lot of the support that I did, which wasn't particularly profitable from a consulting perspective, but it was really filling for me, was how to help people in my community stay afloat during this time of immense transition and change. And what's really cool is that those skills, those consulting skills, led into the success that I've had since then with much different companies, bigger companies, not these small kind of local sort of quote unquote mom and pops.
So when did you start stepping into the hat of an investor?
So it's funny because I had played investor on TV. I'd messed around with investing even while I was at Two Doulas. There were a number of people in my community, other doulas. There was someone who wanted to start a mobile childcare company, as an example. There was another person who wanted to start a company that provided basically Uber for kids that had car seats, things like that in my community, right?
Yeah.
And I had invested in these companies and to a small degree to kind of help get them off the ground, very grassroots style. So that notion was always there of like, there are these other businesses I believe in. I don't want to run them. I don't want to be involved in operating them, but I believe in the people. I believe in the solution. There's a gap there that I see. The product market fit is there. Like, I'm going to put my money behind this, right? And so it was just that, but on a bigger scale, really. And then in 2021, I had the opportunity to spend the year working on the other side of the table, working for a VC. One of the things I looked into while I was exploring acquisition was VC funding for Two Doulas. I didn't end up going down that route because I went down the M&A route from being privately held. But through that, I had a lot of questions, kind of what the other side of the table was looking at. And at the same time, as it so happened, my dad became a venture capitalist. And so our trajectories sort of came together. And he was asking for my expertise. He's in the healthcare field as well, a different kind of background than mine. And he was asking for my help in doing some clinical diligencing on women's health companies and exploring that product market fit and determining if that gap was meaningful and what the market would look like in market analysis. And so I came into this VC firm that he and a colleague of his started as an advisor, as a consultant advisor. And I got really, really interested. And so even though I was coming in kind of on the consulting advisor side, I kind of got deeper and deeper. And eventually I became the COO of that company. And I was doing a ton of diligencing, probably like 50 to 100 companies a month. I was building the clinical network globally for that fund. And the essence of the fund that they started, the thesis was, let's seat clinical diligencing at the same stage of the equation as the financial diligencing of the company. So basically, like, would Theranos have been the disaster that it was if one pathologist had a chance to really look at this and determine whether this was actually clinically feasible, right, at the very front end? So their thesis is better for the LPs to get a really good, clear understanding of the clinical efficacy and the clinical need for a product from a digital health medical device company standpoint early in the process when you're looking at the financials, right? And so I really believe in that and was excited to kind of help that grow. Definitely don't see my future in the VC world, but I continue to be involved from an investor standpoint and also as an advisor.
So what were the three sort of biggest realizations you had looking at 50 to 100 decks a month?
I don't know if I have three, but I have two. And they're really the big two. It's the people, right? And so you're evaluating with these size companies. So I was looking at seed stage, Series A, Series B companies, or early-ish stage companies. It's the people. And, do they have the experience? Do they have the humility? Do they have the temperament? Do they have the resilience, right? Are they the right people to do it? That's number one. And the second is the gap, right? Is the product market fit present? Is the gap sufficient enough? Like there's a lot of really cool products out there, really interesting tech, really innovative devices, but is there a market for it? Like, is there a real need for it? And is that need sufficient to capitalize that company in a way that is meaningful, right? And so it's the product and the people.
Mm. Yeah, that's the main thing, right? I think just as in life. So where did Shadowbox come into this, and like did they approach you or did you find them, and like how did you get involved with them?
So I decided that I wanted one project on my desk every morning when I woke up instead of 16. I was out there consulting and I was doing a lot of really fun work, and I had projects that were 2 weeks long and I had projects that were 18 months long. And, it was very fun, but also very messy. And I really desired this sense of consistency and the feeling that I could really devote myself to something, but I wasn't ready to start my own business again yet. I had kind of gone through that. I certainly wasn't ready in my relationship. My husband wasn't ready for me to be an entrepreneur again myself. So I sort of wanted the next best thing. And I was looking to become a right-hand person to a founder or founders that were doing something that I was interested in. And I wanted a project for the next 2 to 4 years that would be engaging and where I could really provide value. So what I was looking for was an early stage company in that kind of Series A, Series B stage, even seed stage, right? Because I told you before that once things get to, 200 employees, like it's just not my space anymore. That was commercializing, that had some revenue, but was trying to figure out like its real go-to-market, how to scale, how to, that piece of the strategy. It was in healthcare. It was a product that I really believed in and thought there was value in, and where I liked the people. And I felt like I could add something from my background on the commercial side, right? So I was looking for entrepreneurs that had experience that I didn't have, either in the market space, in, their financial education, their business education, but maybe didn't have the legs on the sales and marketing side or the experience on the sales and marketing side that I did. And I lucked into meeting Shadowbox through a personal introduction. And it was pretty funny. I met Greg Stein, who's the CEO, and it was a networking conversation. I was looking for a full-time gig for the first time in 15 years, and he was not looking for a VP of sales and marketing or a commercial lead at all. And the first thing he said to me was that he was very candid. He was like, "Hey, we're not the place for you. I'm not looking for someone with your skill set right now. Like, we're going to do that down the line. But I really, I know a lot of people and I see your background and, we know one another, through this network. And so I always want to help people, and it's accurate, right? I've seen him do that now for 2 years. He's always willing to have that conversation and help people find a good landing place. And 30 minutes later, by the end of the call, it was, I really think that we should explore this further. And so it was
It was almost like you were good at sales or something.
It's funny though, it wasn't a sales call. It was just the right fit. And there was a lot of synergy, for what I was looking for and what they didn't know they were looking for, or maybe were looking for, but they didn't think the timing was right to find. And then after meeting Greg, I met his co-founder, Bev, who was a CFO, and then met the executive team. And kind of as I got to know the people, as I got to know the problem they were solving in more detail, it just became really clear. A lot of synergy.
So let's talk a little bit about Shadowbox and what do they do?
So Shadowbox has a really innovative way of doing interoperability on the front end between referring provider offices and the places where patient information needs to go for care. So started out in the lab space because our CEO, co-founder Greg's background is as a lab executive. And so started out go-to-market and clinical diagnostic lab, and now we have go-to-market and other ancillaries, and are moving into supporting referrals into hospital systems as well. But essentially, it's 2025 and people's information is still being faxed, still being sent on CD-ROM, still being literally delivered on paper, right? You can have like a lab specimen that has a piece of paper with it that has your clinical data and personal health information on it. And there's a big gap there. And we all know that there is interoperability in healthcare is something that's been talked about for, as long as I've been in the healthcare industry. And the things that have come to market to solve that problem have solved it for the one percenters, right? So
Yeah.
Mayo Clinic has a good interoperability service, right? But for the long tail of healthcare, for everybody else, and for the downstream services, that gap still exists. And so my goal is to bury the last fax machine in my backyard. I think it's 2025, and there's no reason we should still be using that antiquated technology, and to make it accessible for providers and patients to be able to get information over to where it needs to go in real time and with complete accuracy. You know, a lot of what's out there is, let's keep using faxes, but we'll just try to use AI to OCR and read faxes. Why are we still doing that? Yeah, that's what Shadowbox does.
Yeah, it's so funny to me that the government and healthcare are the two things that when you get in behind them, you're like, why are we still running off of like Windows 7? I don't understand. Like that was shut down in 1996, but all of our other software runs on that, so we can't change it.
Yeah, but why? Like that is my entrepreneur brain, right? Is like every time I get told, well, we can't do this because of that, and Epic does it this way. It's like, why? I don't understand. Why? Tell me why.
Yeah, it's the
If you can't tell me
inefficiency.
why, I'm going to tell you a different way to do it that makes more sense.
All right, so by the end of the 2020s, when we reach 2030, like would be your vision for what Shadowbox could help healthcare achieve?
So I think there's a whole lot that's changing in the mix right now with the advent of AI and how we incorporate AI technology into healthcare and clinical decision making support, and all kinds of other things that are coming out of that. I think the challenge is that there's still a disconnect between patient information, which is, what gets pulled into those systems to make them useful, and those systems, right? So it doesn't matter if you have a digital health company, a medical device company, an AI company, an overlay clinical decision making tool, you need that access to information. And so the federal government came in and passed legislation to say, hey, EHR companies, like, you don't own this data. Patients own this data. You have to stop information blocking, stop building walls around patient data. Let us get at it so that, we can use all these other tools. And unfortunately, the reality on the ground doesn't reflect that aspiration. So
Sure.
hopefully in 2030, the goal is to put the keys back in the hands of patients and providers and give them tools that will allow them to manipulate and control their own data and move it through systems where it needs to go, and have oversight and proper consent on, who accesses their data, how they access their data, how they use their data, for the benefit of their care rather
Yeah.
than just to monetize,
No, as a user, it's been one of the most maddening things in this day and age where it's just like, oh, I'm in the same healthcare group, but I get a different doctor than I normally do, and I got to fill out 37 pages. And it was like, I just did that 6 months ago, and then they send me to a specialist that's still in the same building,
Yep.
but I got to fill out the same 37. I'm like, why is there not just one central hub for all medical technology that I as a as a patient, yeah, it's all there, and I've ended once.
That's inefficient, right, Travis? Like, you're describing something that creates inefficiencies, creates costs for all of us, but there's also actual really significant impacts to patient care, right?
Yeah.
So I think the piece that gets missed, because what we all see every day is the inefficiency part, is like, let's say that you have a medication that's contraindicated for another medication, and one of them is housed over here and one of them is housed over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this is no longer just an inefficiency, and those inefficiencies are real and meaningful from a financial and personal standpoint. All of a sudden, now we're dealing with a situation where,
Yeah, it's dangerous.
you get,
But look, I mean, I think after Heath Ledger passed away, they said that was one of the big things is that he had two drugs from one doctor and
yep.
in New York and one from LA, and nobody was talking. And yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Where there's all this, yeah, again, the inefficiency. I'm a Libra, so I like things balanced. So when there's out of balance, I'm like, no.
Yeah, and like, when there's a will, there's a way. And I think that we all have to decide that our healthcare information and data is significant and it's important, and we have to put our money behind that, right, as investors. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I mean, our bloody credit report follows us everywhere, and like everybody can access it. So like, why don't we just have like the health score that's the same sort of principle, right? Anybody just can pull it up when you give them the permission to do that. It's like, I don't.
They'll tell you that it's because, we're really protecting your patient health information. Well, my banking information is regulated and protected too. And yet
Yeah.
somehow people get access to what street I lived on when I was 17 in order to,
Yeah. It always funny. We're protecting it. And was like, if you're protecting it, I had one version of 17 pages, and over a year now I have 6 versions of that. Where's that all going?
yeah, on a fax, which is super protected, may I tell you?
Yeah, sure. All right. So somebody's listening to this interview. They're reading the chapter in the book. They love what you're doing, either from a consulting standpoint or sandbox. How do they find you? How do they get in contact with you, or how do they just get involved in what you are doing?
Yeah, I am pretty low tech and I'm getting older, as my kids like to tell me every day. So the easiest way to reach me is just to find me on LinkedIn. Becca F. Gordon is my handle on LinkedIn, and or email Becca F. Gordon at Gmail is the easy way to reach me. And I'm pretty responsive, but I don't have, 57 social media platforms and all of that. And if you're interested in what Shadowbox is doing, definitely reach out. Our website is shadowbox.com.
Love it. Well, Becca, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Absolutely. This is really fun. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I can't wait to read your book and learn more about all of these other brilliant entrepreneurs that have, solved a problem, found ways to solve problems.
Wonderful. Take care.